Hello, Libby Gray, LD for Sticks here with another installment on how to call follow spots. I'm a little fuzzy today because we had a show last night at Pine Knob in Detroit, and then bus ride, and tomorrow's show is Deer Creek in Noblesville. So I'm coming to you live from a random Sheraton Hotel in Indianapolis. Quick aside, we're going to call all the venues by their roadie names, like Pine Knob and Deer Creek and Great Woods and Jones Beach and Starplex. We're not going to worry about any of the marketing names. It's funny, there are only a couple of venues that have managed to have their marketing names catch on, usually only because they use them for multiple decades. Because some of these things change their names every 2 years. We don't care. So Garden State Arts Center in New Jersey can sometimes be referred to as PNC because it's been PNC for so long and nobody gets in a twist about it. The other one, Jiffy Lube Live, can also be called Nissan Pavilion. That everyone knows that that's the amphitheater outside Fairfax. But if you start saying, the Blockbuster or the Verizon Arena amphitheater, people are like, oh, come on, which one? Where are we talking about? So we're going to use the roadie names for these things. I've always said, if I won the lottery, I'm going to buy the marketing name for the Virginia Beach amphitheater in perpetuity. It's always called the Shed in Virginia Beach because they tend to sell really ridiculously long names for that venue. I think this year or last year it was the United Veterans Home Loans Amphitheater at Virginia Beach. It's like you need to take a breath in the middle of the name of that thing. No offense to the marketers, but I'm going to name that thing the Shed at Virginia Beach if I win the lottery. That's just how it's going to be. Moving on. Last night at Pine Knob, something happened that was of immediate relevance to our conversations on how to call spots. A little bit of backstory. I'm on a long tour with Styx, REO Speedwagon, and Loverboy. And Styx and REO trade places as headliners. Loverboy is in the support position, and there are big set changes that are either 15 or 20 minutes. Big set pieces rolling, trusses being retrimmed, large arrays of floor lights being set out. They are big set changes, and people are running the whole time. And during that 15 or 20 minutes, as the director, you have to check in your spots and then be on radio with the lighting crew, helping them assess all the floor lights, check all of your floor systems, make sure the truss trims are right. There's a lot going on, and it happens very quickly, very tight frame. And then typically we're only done about a minute before it's time for the house lights cue to get rolling. Because we're playing outdoor amphitheaters, everybody's under some kind of curfew thing, so it's tight. I got on a headset, and the headset was out. I had intercom failure. So, as it happens, I was able to assess it pretty quickly. We have multiple headsets and belt packs out there. You always ask, what's changed? Well, what changed was my rig. I started using my own cable headset belt pack, and it turns out I had a bad cable. A chair probably rolled over. It happens all the time. And we got it fixed, and I checked my floor lights and spoke briefly to my spots, and we were off to the races. But it brings home the point that you have to have a spot meeting before the show with your operators to give them a lot of information, because the chance to do it on headset in 15 minutes is not always available to you. Sometimes the comm is out, and it is not uncommon to spend 15 minutes getting the comm working. All of us have encountered this at some time. This is the number one reason not to have your spot meeting on headsets 15 minutes before the show. There are two reasons, really. One, what if you don't have the comm? When you start that show, if you've just got it working again, then the operators jump into your show flying blind without any information. You have to feed it to them as the show starts to unfold, which basically guarantees the first few cues or songs of your show are going to be sloppy. And even if that only happens once or twice a year, isn't that really once or twice too often? Don't count on that 15 minutes being available to you for the meeting. The other reason to have spot meeting before the show is that you want to be courteous, and you want to see who's in attendance, and you want to assess your operators. A lot of people will just say, let's not do a spot meeting on the loading dock or dimmers, which are the accepted locations at half hour. Let's just meet on headset 15 minutes before the show. With apologies to all of my very dear friends who do this, that is a terrible idea. And I just said it I said it and my phone is going to blow up and they're going to be like, did you just say that was a terrible... Yeah, pals, not only is it a terrible idea, it's a stupid idea. I called you stupid on YouTube. Hit me with a text and complain. It's okay. Don't have a headset meeting 15 minutes before the show. We already talked about how you may not have that 15 minutes available to you if there is a technical problem with intercom. Also, if you get on headsets 15 minutes before the show and you only have 5 operators instead of 6, how do you know where the 6th person is? Are they still putting on a harness? Did they get stuck in the catwalk? Are they still trying to park their car in the parking lot? You don't know that they're late and you don't know why, and you're going to spend 15 minutes trying to find them or get someone else in a harness up there. If you meet at half hour and someone's late, you have time to proverbially warm up the bullpen and get somebody else in harness just in case the person who was on the call doesn't show up in time for the climb. So that's another reason you can't count on that 15-minute thing. Attendance. Next, courtesy. You want to introduce yourself to your spot ops like a human being. I find it helpful to write down their names, but we'll talk about that in a different conversation bit. They are not borrowed mules. Look them in the eye, say hi, show them some respect. You are required to be here for the show. They are not. They are a volunteer force. Yes, they're getting paid, but they are volunteering for this call. I have to be at the show. They don't. So keep that in mind and treat them respectfully. Other reason to meet them in person is you want to assess their skill levels. Are they new and nervous? Staring at you with big deer eyes? Are they older veterans who are checked out, surreptitiously checking their cell phone on the side? By the way, here's the trick. If someone is disregarding you and checking their cell phone, stop talking and stare at them intently. It will become awkward very quickly, and they will realize they're being rude and put their cell phone away. But that spot meeting is part of their job for the night, and they are required, not requested, required to give you their undivided attention. Because if your veteran who is bored and distracted or checked out can't give you 6 minutes of their undivided attention at Dimmer Beach before the show, here's the news. They're not going to be able to give you 100 minutes of their undivided attention during the course of the show. And you're going to have to watch them carefully and repeat your cues because they're just distracted and this is all beneath them and they've done it a million times. It's unfortunate, but some guys get like that. And they are just as much of a handful. In fact, they are more of a handful and more likely to miss their cues than the new nervous kid who is deeply engrossed and really locked up and listening very tightly. I'll take someone who is smart and new over someone who is old and bored any day of the week. And so will you, I'm sure of it, when you get to see the differences between these performances. So one way to find out if someone is new is to ask the question gently. If you say, is anybody brand new? Nobody's going to stick up their hand. Nobody wants to admit that. That's just embarrassing. Nobody wants to be the green guy. So what you say is there anyone on this call who has run less than a half a dozen shows? Because half a dozen is not really an embarrassing number. It may be their very first call, but they are just admitting that they've done less than a half a dozen. That's just someone who's kind of new-ish. Make it easy for them to admit they're new, and they will, because you will want to know. We've talked about this in a prior segment. You will want to extend your standbys, and you will want to repeat your cues. And an in-person spot meeting, which almost always has varying levels of skill, is your opportunity to warn your veterans and enlist their support for that. You can say, since we've got a couple of newish operators here, I hope you veterans will bear with me. I'm going to make the standbys a little longer, and I may repeat cues a little bit more than you would normally hear, but I want to make this an easy show for everybody. And the veterans will get on board with that because they don't want their own crewmate to look bad. So that's a way of making sure everybody has a smoother show. Assess the skill level, be courteous, and finally, you need to find out if anybody's impaired. There are lots of different ways to be impaired, but we are only going to talk about booze and weed. Lots of states, weed is totally legal, which means nobody is getting bounced from a call for being high, because there's nothing wrong with it. The venue may have a policy against it, but it is very difficult to prove and even worse to enforce. Very hard to enforce. So you're looking for inappropriate giggling, red eyes, let alone someone who stinks of weed, which almost no one does now because vape pens don't smell like anything, and someone who is clowning around. You're going to want to repeat your cues for this individual. You're also going to want to remind them of basics, like be sure you're not climbing with loose objects in your pockets, because high people sometimes forget things. Just happens. If someone is drunk, you need to proceed with caution. This is a very difficult charge to prove. If you can smell alcohol on them and they are obviously intoxicated, they represent a hazard to themselves climbing and potentially a hazard to the people beneath them, and that's a job for the steward. That is way above your pay grade. You suspect someone is impaired, drunk, too drunk to safely do the show, you got to go talk to the steward. And they will have to handle that internally because you can't prove it one way or another. So that is, my cursor's there. I don't know if you guys can see that. This is all so weird filming. So that's the other reason you're assessing your spots. You're being courteous, you're figuring out their skill level, you're figuring out if anyone's impaired, and you're buying yourself time for troubleshooting before the show, because sooner or later you will need every minute of that time to troubleshoot. So that's why you have a spot meeting. What is the spot meeting? We will discuss in the next segment. I'll probably just give you my complete spot wrap, start to finish. You will develop your own spot wrap, and it will become pithy and concise and highly refined over the years. I can tell you it should hit the basics at the spot meeting of home targets, however you're going to identify them, numbers, what you use for sizes, what you use for times on your cues, basics of color changes, and what to do for emergencies or unexpected things, like, band member decides to go crowd surfing. You will have protocols for that, and they may be different from everybody else's, which is why you need to clue the operators in on the details of your show, and it's going to take longer than you may have time for right before a show. So have a meeting with your operators. I know it's annoying, but do it anyway. And next time we talk, we'll talk about specifically the information you're going to share with them at the spot meeting. All right. Have a good day.